Well, he's back home in his humble office, ready to talk some Royals baseball. The good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. A little Kauffman Corner coming your way after a weekend where Randy actually made it to Kauffman Corner. He spent the weekend at the ballpark, is now back. We'll talk about what he saw, in addition to obviously the Royals taking 2 out of 3 from the Astros, a chance to watch Cole Reagans up close and personal. We'll get Randy's thoughts on his weekend at the ballpark. We'll talk about Bobby Witt Jr. He's closing in. It's clear based upon the way he's stealing bases. He wants to be a 30-50 guy. What does that mean? That's rare air. Is this going to be the best year of Bobby Witt's career? We'll talk about that. Is Zack Greinke a Hall of Famer? We're talking Royals baseball right now on Kauffman Corner.
You're listening to Kauffman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kauffman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kauffman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can be a part of the conversation. We can see your comments, react to your comments. You can chat with the folks here. We stream live Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Central. That's usually what it is. Make sure you follow both Rany and I, and you'll know when it is. Sometimes family things occur, and we have to adjust a little bit. But for the most part, you can count on 10 p.m. on a Sunday night. That is when we stream live, and you can be a part of the conversation, as many people are right now. Go ahead and hit that like button, that love button. Make sure you follow, subscribe, do all those things. It does great stuff for us, and let's be honest, don't cost you nothing. Rany, you're back home. We had you in on the radio show on Friday, and I know you also had a quick trip down to Wichita in the midst of watching 3 baseball games. You know, why wouldn't you, right? Rany from Wichita, if people don't know. Your overall impressions. What were your thoughts from a weekend seeing the boys in blue up close and in person?
I mean, it was a good weekend for the Royals, and taking 2 out of 3 from the Astros is nothing to sneeze at. You always worry. It's middle of September. The Royals always seem to try and salvage a bad season with a good September and get our hopes up for the next year. I still remember the Kyle Davies renaissance in like 2008. We all thought Kyle Davies was going to be a Cy Young contender the next year. He was not. So you want to be very careful reading too much into this. But coming off of, winning 2 out of 3 here in Chicago, and I was at one of those games, I've been seeing a lot of winning Royals baseball up close and personal recently. So it's a unusual experience. But the Astros are, they're fighting for the AL West division title. And the difference between finishing first and second in that division is the difference between getting a first round bye and, potentially going on the road in round 1. So, I mean, they've got a lot to play for. And the Royals just flat out beat them Friday and Saturday. So there was there's definitely some good things to take from the weekend. Bobby Witt, homered and stole 2 bases on Friday. Cole Reagans came out yesterday and didn't throw the ball 20 feet away from home plate in the first inning, and
right,
that was really all I cared about. I just like the first 5 minutes into the game, I'm like, okay, he's fine, everything's fine. It was just the mound in Toronto. Nelson Velasquez hit an absolute bomb to dead center, one of maybe his longest home runs so far as a Royal, and I keep waiting for that pumpkin to that guy to turn it back into a pumpkin, and he hasn't done that yet. So again, we've said this before. What's as bad as the season has been, it's very hard to completely give up on some of the young players that the Royals have. And there's enough green shoots here, enough notes of positivity that you can still dream that they're heading in the right direction. Um, I worry that it's fool's gold because I've been burned before, not once, not twice, many times. But it was a fun weekend, and I'm hoping that it is a sign of something better for next season.
Yeah. And listen, if you take 2 out of 3 from the Astros, one or two things happened. Is it baseball happened? A phrase I'll give credit to Mick Schaefer, who coined. Sometimes baseball happens, right? It could be as simple as that. Or do you give it a sign of some positivity? I'd like to think a little bit of both.
I think a little bit of both. I mean, yesterday there were definitely some shenanigans with what was it? Was it Isbell that put the bunt down, and the Astros misplayed it, and that led to a big inning. But they scored some runs. I mean, the offense was there. Like I said, Bobby Witt's been in the thick of things. But Logan Porter hitting his first major league home run. This we're at a point in the season. I'd like to think most of the guys we're seeing in the lineup from day in and day out are the young guys. This isn't they're not winning games because Matt Duffy is leading the charge, right? Everybody you're seeing out there, more or less, is somebody that they are hopeful will be on the team next year and is young enough that they might even be better next year. So today, Nick Lofton had another 2 hits. Like there's a lot of hope here that what we're seeing is just a harbinger for what's coming next year. So today, even today, I mean, they only scored the 1 run, but they only struck out 5 times. Was it I think Friday they walked 6 times and had 1 strikeout the entire game. Today, Bobby Witt struck out, which was notable. It was his first strikeout in 37 plate appearances. Like his strikeout rate just keeps going down. Between strikeouts, he had like 11 hits, 5 walks, and 8 stolen bases from between 1 strikeout and the next. So, if Bobby Witt is actually now suddenly combines this kind of power, not forget the speed, but if he combines this kind of power with the ability to make contact at an elite level, that's the next step for him to take. And if he takes one more step from where he is now, that's the difference between a star level player and a superstar level player.
Yeah, and I think he's closing in on one of the real milestones. By the way, I'll remind you that we're brought to you by our friends. Thank you. I'm wearing my GAN Asphalt and Concrete shirt. Proudly serving the greater Kansas City area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they're not a problem anymore. Not when you know GAN. Been making them disappear since 1994. That's almost 30 years in business, folks. Coming up on 30 years. That's why they're the best in the business. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. GAN Asphalt keeps your parking lot safe and helps your business avoid unnecessary delays and expenses. Find them online right now, GANasphalt.com. How about it? He clearly is going for it on these stolen bases, and he's going to get there with ease. Now with 47 stolen bases, 29 home runs. I started tracking this, I think, when he was at about 24 or 5 home runs. I think he was at about 36 or 7 stolen bases. I'm not sure where it was. And it was like 19 guys. First time I looked it up, whatever it was 19 guys. It was a pretty impressive list. The list right now, just to be clear, of where he stands and just the 29 and 47. Do you know what the 29 and 47 club is?
Well, I know. I mean, it's probably not much different than the 30-50 club. And
it's a little bit different.
The 30-50 club, before this season, there were 2 guys in the history of baseball.
Yes.
That had ever done 30-50. And we're talking about the elite of the elite in terms of power speed. Eric Davis and Barry Bonds.
Right.
Now, of course, he doesn't even have the best combination this year because Ronald Acuna has basically had the best power speed combination of all time.
And we should point out Acuna with 37 and 66 is barreling towards a 40-70. Ronald Acuna is doing things that have never been done before.
He's already broken the all-time power speed number.
Yes.
I know Hanley Ramirez would be on that list because Hanley Ramirez right now, there's basically Bobby Witt. There's only 2 shortstops that have had a better combination of power and speed than Bobby Witt. That's Alex Rodriguez in 98. He had 42 homers and 46 stolen bases. He was the power speed king before this year. And then Hanley, I think, was 29 homers, 51 steals. Is that
29 and 51. So Bobby Witt is the sixth player to have 29 home runs and 47 stolen bases. Obviously, 30-50 is going to be the nice round benchmark. But like I said, I've been tracking this on wherever he was, saying who else was there. And now there is Ronald Acuna, 37 and 66. Eric Davis, 37 homers, 50 stolen bases. Eric Davis has a 27 homer, 80 stolen base season as well. Barry Bonds with the 33 and 52. Barry Bonds has a 40-40. He's one of four players with a 40-40 as well. He did that in a different season. You mentioned Hanley Ramirez with 29-51. Mike Trout had a 30-49 season at age 20.
Yep.
Age 20. That's amazing. Here's what's interesting to me of these seasons. And Randy, you're right. There's only the three of them. If he gets there, he'll be one of three with the or one of four now with the 30-50. Ronald Acuna is 25. Eric Davis was 25. Barry Bonds was 25 years old. I mentioned Mike Trout, 20. Hanley Ramirez, 23. Bobby Witt is 23. Is this going to be the best season of Bobby Witt's career? I think, first of all, I think most people that are listening to this podcast understand it's easier to steal bases now with the new rules. So that's a little bit inflated. But are we looking at the apex of his career with this kind of season?
So I think it's quite possible that this will be the apex of his career from a pure home run stolen base standpoint, right? Because like you said, stolen bases are a young man's game. He may never have this combination of homers and steals again. But that doesn't mean that this is the best season of his career. Like Barry Bonds, Barry Bonds, yeah, there's obviously the PED issue you have to at least, mention. But the reality is Barry Bonds was an elite player for many, many years after he went 33 and 52, because like most players, as he lost speed slowly as he got older, he maintained his power and he developed his plate discipline even more. And Mike Trout, I think, is an excellent example. Mike Trout at age 20 was about as good as he's ever been, but he was an elite. He's remained an elite player for another 5 years, even though his stolen bases, he's basically cut his stolen bases in half by the time he was in his mid-20s. Now he doesn't steal almost at all, but the power actually got better. And I think that's what you expect from Bobby Witt. You expect the steals to go down over the next couple of years. Although his speed, he has not lost any speed yet. And his players typically lose speed almost from the moment they make the major leagues. Speed is a young athlete's game. We see this with running backs in football. You'll see it with speedsters in baseball. And that's why you don't want to bet on a pure speed guy who has no power. And you also don't want to have a young hitter, a guy who's got all power and no speed, because the athleticism probably isn't there for them to age well. You want the blend so that as they lose their speed, they have the ability to develop more power and more plate discipline. And I think to me, what will determine whether or not Bobby Witt's going to get better than this is whether or not he learns the strike zone better. That's why I'm so obsessed with the fact that his strikeouts seem to be coming down. And his walks, at least in September, he is drawing walks at a higher pace than he ever has before. So if he learns the strike zone and his chase rate drops, I think that will more than make up for any loss in speed over the next couple of years. It will allow him to tap into his power more because he's forcing more hitters' counts. So no, I'm fairly comfortable saying this is not the best. This is not going to be the best season of his career. Maybe his career high in stolen bases, but it's not going to be his best season overall, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I was looking at, okay, how does the season stack up, right? Compared to some of the other ones, I thought, 30-30 seasons. Right? How much do you think the new rules have bloated his stolen base totals?
I think it's had an impact for sure. I think stolen bases are up almost 40% from last year. But at the same time, one of the reasons why they made these changes to the rules with the pickoffs and the larger bases, et cetera, is because stolen bases are at, I don't want to say a historical, but certainly within our lifetime. But prior to this season, stolen bases were as infrequent as I've ever seen. We've seen the last 50 years. The average, last I looked, the average American League team was on pace for somewhere in the range of 110 stolen bases. You compare that to Eric Davis, I mentioned 1987. The average National League team in 1987 stole 154 bases. So yeah, maybe the rules make it easier now, but the culture of the sport, the willingness of teams to risk getting caught stealing, in the 80s was much higher. So, stolen bases were, a 50 stolen base season today in 2023 is still much more impressive or much more of an outlier than a 50 stolen base season was when you and I were teenagers.
I decided to pull. There have been 67 30-30 seasons. Ronald Acuna's already done that this year. I think Julio Rodriguez also has eclipsed 30-30. He's got 30 home runs and 36 stolen bases right now for Seattle. So I thought, okay, well, how good a hitter is Bobby Witt Jr.? And I think whatever label we'd put on him right now, you've pointed out with the cutting of the strikeouts, he's trending in the right direction, right? That's the one thing. If you were to take Bobby Witt Jr.'s, if he finishes with an OPS where he's at right now, where do you think Bobby Witt Jr. would rank amongst all 30-30 seasons? Are you looking it up right now? I see.
Well, I'm not, but I already have another list that's
Okay.
similar. Are we talking based on what, OPS plus, or what are we?
Regular OPS.
Oh, regular OPS. Okay.
67.
Out of 67, I'm guessing he's.
And I'll do it by OPS plus too, just to make it fair.
I'm guessing he's like 55th or something. Like the reality is, if the guys who do both of those in the same season, it's rare to do that and not be at an elite level of offensive performance. And I think his OPS plus is like 122. His OPS is around 800, 820, something like that. Yeah, 823.
823 would put him, just for the record, 61st.
Okay. Yep.
Once he gets to 30-30.
Yeah, he's very much towards the bottom.
Put him at 61st of what would then be 68 guys to 30-30. You said OPS plus. So to rank it by OPS plus, to put it into context of the season that is being had, he moves up to 54.
Okay.
At 122. Yeah. He's got a 122.
Because a lot of those guys were doing that during the juice ball era in the 90s. And so OPSs were a little bit inflated then. But yeah, it's clearly, he's, not, he's below average for a 30-30 guy in terms of overall offense. But that's among a very elite group of players.
I will say on the 30-30, it's not just a young athlete deal, right? I mentioned everybody was like 23 to 25, 20, 23, 23, 25, 25 were the ages, putting Bobby Witt Jr. in the 29-47 group. When you get to 30-30s, the ages start to vary. So you do get some more accomplished and better eyes, or more experienced eyes, I guess I should say. Older eyes, generally not, myself included. Barry Bonds did it at 31, Bobby Abreu at 30, Howard Johnson did it at 30, 32 for Barry Larkin. If I do it by age, the oldest players ever to 30-30, there are 14 that did it after the age of 30. Okay. So from that standpoint, my point to that is, it does look like there is a quality window where he should still be able to do the batted part of it. We'll see when the wheels always go away, but there's more of a reason to keep stealing right now. But it does speak to, he is an elite talent. He may be on the bottom end of elite, but he is an elite talent.
And I think the reason, probably I would guess if you were to rank them by slugging average, you might rank a little higher. Like, I think the main reason for that is his on base. And, on base ability, i.e. walk rate, that is a skill that does tend to improve throughout your 20s, right? You peak, your ability to draw walks peaks at a much later age than certainly your speed or even your batting average. So that would bode well. The problem is he is a Royal. He's in an organization that has shown a unique ability to not develop plate discipline. Hopefully that is changing. And, there are signs of that with him specifically. But that, to me, is going to determine whether he can actually be the kind of player who's even better in 5 years than he is now. And you mentioned, like, 30-30. You can steal 30 bases without elite speed by just being somewhat fast and smart on the bases. 50 stolen bases requires the kind of speed that you're going to only really see in a young player, unless you're Ricky Henderson or something like that. So, it wouldn't surprise me 5 years from now. Yeah, he's still a 30-30 guy. You might see him eventually be a 40 home run, 30 stolen guy. Basically, he might be more likely to have more homers than steals in 5 years.
So what is this? What does 30-50 mean to you?
It means they need to sign into a long-term deal if they can. It means, it is the combination of power and speed at a young age is generally a very good sign for a player's long-term future, the ability to have a long career. The main impediments would be durability, like we mentioned Eric Davis, durability. Bobby Witt I don't believe he's been on the injured list in his career. And, let's pray that he never will. But, he has shown the single most important predictor of a guy's durability is in the future is his durability in the past. And he has shown the ability to be durable. And then, I would argue, a work ethic. I mentioned Hanley Ramirez is very similar to Witt in that he was the same age, 23. He had 29 homers and 51 steals. Witt's at 29 and 47. Like, you look at Hanley Ramirez as maybe a cautionary tale as a guy who really didn't get much better than he was at, he peaked at age 25 as a hitter, but he was really never better than he was from age 23 to 25. But even at a young age, Hanley Ramirez had a reputation of not being a max effort guy, not really putting in the kind of work ethic that we've already seen, I think, from Bobby Witt, the determination to improve. I mean, Hanley was a bad defensive shortstop, and unlike Bobby Witt, didn't really get better as he got older. So I am hopeful that those are the two main roadblocks I would think for a long and productive career for Bobby Witt that he's shown an ability to avoid so far. So yes, if they can sign him to 10 or 12-year deal, that right there is enough reason to do so.
And I like this Matt jumped on. Is it wise to sign any player on a team that might lose 110 games to a long-term deal, or is it a sign that we have to start somewhere? Listen, I don't know that you can get a guy to sign a 10 or 12-year deal.
That's the big issue.
Losses. And I think there is real question, and we'll talk more about that in the offseason about whether or not it would be prudent, because if he does get hurt, how much of the Twins' downtime was because Joe Mauer had this massive contract and he had been robbed of his power, right? Like, I pointed out the one-loss record of the Joey Votto and Todd Helton and all these guys. When they signed those big contracts, the average win-loss record went down for all those teams. Now, they were a little bit different. They were part of winning and then signed those contracts, and they couldn't maintain it. This is a team that's not winning. So almost mathematically, it couldn't help but go up. But the point being, did the contracts then saddle them with, they didn't have enough left over to put together a quality team around them. Royals got a lot of room to spend some money. We know that. But I want to hit on what Matt said right here, because this is something I've talked about a lot. That Beltran stopped stealing once he got paid. Will Bobby Witt Jr. keep stealing in 4 years? And I think that's an interesting dynamic. And I mentioned it. I've told the story, as Matt said a number of times, talking to Carlos Beltran by the cages the year he would get traded to the Astros from the Royals. And I said, what's the plan? And he just was very frank. He's like, listen, Scott Boras says you're a all-around player. You steal bases. You do everything. That's what gets you that's what maximizes your value in that first big free agent contract. After that, it's about hitting the ball over the wall. And you can look at it. He, got that first contract, and then stolen bases went down, and he focused on hitting the ball over the wall. I don't know. What is the industry going to say the value of stolen bases is right now? What's the value of Ronald Acuna stealing as many bases as he is? There are bases that matter and bases that don't, but you were part of an industry. I remember reading, Baseball Prospectus, Rany, that said, not important, right? Like, grossly overrated. And the entire baseball world reacted to that. Like you said, nobody was really, Whit Merrifield's leading the league with like 34 or whatever he was doing. How important is this? Does it even matter? Is it a cute little number because of the history of the game? But in reality, all that matters is the home runs, the fact that he's cutting down on strikeouts, the on base. Do the 50 stolen bases even mean? How much does it mean? It means something when you need a stolen base in a playoff game and you can go get it. It means something, right? But how much does it mean?
It's an excellent question, and you are absolutely right that one of the first things one of the first commandments of Baseball Prospectus when we started it was that the ability to steal bases on a team level was overrated. But it wasn't so much that stolen bases themselves were overrated. They were, but it was a bigger issue was that caught stealings were underrated. I mean, let's try to remember where we were in the mid-90s. If you saw a broadcast And they mentioned how many times a player had, how many steals a player had. They never mentioned whether or not how many times he got caught stealing. Like when Jose Canseco went 40-40, the first player in Major League history to go 40-40, right? He got there because he basically got the green light just to try and steal whenever he wanted to get the 40 steals. You know how many times he got caught that year? 16. So 40 steals sounds amazing. If you steal 40 bases and get caught 16 times, you're not really helping your team. Whereas if you're stealing 40 bases and getting caught 5 times, yeah, you're going to be great. The thing that made Carlos Beltran great was he was the greatest percentage base stealer of all time when he was playing. He was like an 87%, I think, for his career, something like that. But what's happened in the sport, you said the sport has sort of embraced this idea that stolen bases come at a cost. But what the industry has done has eliminated the high risk stolen base attempt. Teams don't try to steal unless the odds are in their favor. I'll give you an example. In 1998, 25 years ago, there were 3,284 stolen bases in baseball. This year, going into today, there are 3,199. So with 2 weeks left in the season, stolen bases are going to be up maybe 2 or 3% this year from 25 years ago. Very, very small amount, almost exactly similar to stolen bases. In 1998, there were 1,505 caught stealings. 1,500 times there was a caught stealing. So the success rate in 1998 was 68.6%. And what we've always said is the break-even point is somewhere around 65 to 70%. We would say 2/3 is kind of a rule of thumb. It's probably even higher. It's more like 70%. So,
well, I've always the things I've read, and I read them in books that you were part of writing, was 60. The debate was always whether it was 67% or 75%. With people kind of settling into the 72 range.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but it's right around there. It depends on how which factors you take into account. You're staying out of the double play, et cetera. Yeah, I honestly, it probably is more like 72%. But our point was simply you don't want to be below 2/3. If you're below 2/3, you're actually costing your team runs. But the point is 68.6% is right around that point. It wasn't helping. Like you weren't the league didn't score any more runs. If they had banned the stolen base in 1998, teams would have scored almost exactly the same number of runs as they actually did. This year, same number of steals as in 1998, almost exactly. Instead of 1,505 caught stealings, 789. So caught stealings are cut almost in half. The success rate this season is 80.2%, which is, I mentioned, but Beltran is, historic at around 87, but like 80% was like a league leading figure when I was a kid. All right. I mean, Ricky Anderson, Vince Coleman might have been above that, but 80% was elite. That is the league as a whole. Now, some of that is, the rule changes. I'm looking as recently as last year. When we do the math really quick, the stolen base percentage was 75.5. So the point is, over the last 25 years, teams have realized there's no point in trying to steal with a slow guy or trying to steal, with an elite catcher. There's no point challenging Yadier Molina or Salvador Perez when he's young. Like teams would not steal against really strong-armed catchers. So the success rate has steadily gone up over time. Then this year you institute these rule changes, and teams not only are stealing more, they're stealing more successfully. So 80%. At 80%, yeah, you're helping your team. There's incentive there to steal that wasn't necessarily there when Carlos Beltran was an elite base stealer. But when he started to lose a little bit of speed, I think he made a sensible decision that, look, if I can steal at 85%, I'll go. But if I'm going to be at 75%, is it really worth picking up, maybe a tiny bit of an advantage if it puts me at risk for injury or, I lose some strength in my legs? There's a cutoff point. But with the rule changes now, I think Bobby Witt's going to be incentivized to steal at an older age than Beltran did.
Who is leading the National League in caught stealings?
It might be Acuna. I mean, he's got the 66 steals, but I want to say he's got like 13 caught stealings.
Ronald Acuna. Who is leading the American League in caught stealings?
It might be Bobby Witt.
It is Bobby.
He got like 10.
He has 10, and that is what I think is notable.
But think about that. 10 is enough to
That's
lead the league.
that's my point. Is he's 47 of 57, 10 caught stealings, leads the American League. He doesn't lead. I don't know who does lead the AL and SPs. I didn't look that up. He's got 47 and is not leading the American League. Acuna does lead the way in the National League, and you're right. He's stolen 66 and been caught 13 times. 82% is the success rate on Bobby Witt. 84% is the success rate on Ronald Acuna. But I'll come back to. So if he's only stealing at 82%, 7 to 15% higher than the minimum rate necessary to make it effective, how much are the stolen bases actually adding?
Well, the rule of thumb I have used for a long time is that the industry as a whole, baseball and certainly baseball fans, overrate the importance of base stealing. But I think for many years we underrated the importance of base running. And by that I mean, speed provides teams more value in the ability to go first to third on singles, second to home on singles, first to home on doubles, to tag up on short fly balls and turn them into sacrifice flies, to advance on ground balls to score on a wild pitch that another player might have held up on, right? So when we studied the correlation between stolen bases and runs, run scoring throughout most of Major League history, there definitely did seem to be a correlation. Teams that stole more bases were scoring more runs, but it might not have been because of the stolen bases. It's because teams that had stolen bases had fast players, right? And we didn't have an ability to break that down. Now we have the ability because we can track not just stolen bases, obviously, but we can track first to third. And, Billy, a lot of guys don't steal bases, but even among guys who don't steal bases, Billy Butler was unique in how rarely he would take an extra base. And we can quantify that. We could talk about how much value he adds. So what's interesting, if you look at Bobby Witt, there's a basket stat at Baseball Reference that is just base running value, runs from base on the bases, which incorporates both steals and base running. He was 5 runs above average last year, 6 runs above average this year. Like, that is a very good total. Like, it's very rare to see a guy go into double digits, like, to get you a full win. But like, if you can be worth 5 runs on the bases a year, combined with stolen bases and base running, that is a significant amount of value. But how much of that is actually stolen bases? It's probably 1 or 2. So I think what you're seeing a lot of the value of Bobby Witt is simply he has the ability to take extra bases above and beyond the steals. Because generally when you're taking those extra bases, the risk of you getting thrown out is probably less than the risk of getting thrown out on a stolen base. Like he's been, you said his success rate's about 82%. So he's thrown out about 18% of the time trying to steal a base. When he's taking extra bases, the risk of him being thrown out, he's been thrown out a few times trying to take an extra base, but the rate is lower. So the cost is less, and he's providing more value in that regard.
Here are the top 10 teams in baseball from 10 to 1 as far as just quantity of stolen bases. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if it sounds like these are good teams. 10 Atlanta, 9 Philadelphia, 8 San Diego. Not winning, but somehow this freaky. They're supposed to be winning.
Yes, they have good stats for winning. They just don't win. They're the Chargers of MLB.
Yeah, 7 the Cubs. 7 the Cubs winning. 6 the Guardians. 5 the A's. 4 the Diamondbacks. 3 the Royals. 2 the Rays. 1 the Reds. I don't know what the hell the Royals and A's are doing in there. The other 8 teams all have at least something going for them.
See, that's interesting because I bet you if you look back even a few years, the correlation between stolen bases and wins would be even less.
Yes.
In part because I think the Royals are always, the Royals are almost always at the top. It's always been part of their identity, and they're always at the bottom in walks, right? So that it's only one season, so maybe it's just a sample size. But I do wonder if the change in rules, like stolen bases have the ability, I should say, to steal bases has more value in 2023 than it has before. And so you are going to see smart teams, winning teams that are taking advantage of these rules and emphasizing the stolen base more than they ever have before.
And I like your point about, like, if you've got a team that can steal bases, you've got a team of athletes. So you've got a team that can go first to third, can take the extra base, can score on the wild pitch. You don't have a team full of Billy Butlers, and so that makes it a little bit differently. And again, I think, hey, the Reds are a surprise, the Diamondbacks are a surprise. Well, maybe that's what the new rule is doing. The new rules are doing. Like, these teams were clearly building towards something. Maybe they're arriving earlier because the new rules are not now magnifying athleticism. So
Well, and also, the rules are emphasizing young players, right?
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Right, but but my point is, so like you mentioned these teams. These are also teams that have like rookies who are like excelling. I mean, Ellie De La Cruz for the Reds and Corbin Carroll and Arizona. It's like it is a young man's sport now. That's the thing. The takeaway from this is that, like, this is why signing free agents, I feel like, is more fraught than ever, because you're seeing fewer and fewer players who are, especially position players, who are excelling in their 30s. Like, it is a game of speed, not just leg speed, but like arm speed on the mound. And if you can't hit a fastball, you're out of the game early. And hitting a fastball is a young man's game as well. So,
well, and to your point about it being a young man's game, then I would also offer that's the reason why, if there is a contract done with Bobby Witt Jr., there cannot be a no trade clause. The Royals have to be able to move the contract.
I think everything's negotiable. I think it would be a big give to give that. But the thing about a no trade clause is that there's no such thing as an ironclad no trade clause. You can always convince a guy. You have to sweeten the deal. It's a point of negotiating leverage. It's not a moral principle. You know what I mean? Like, a player who's got a no trade clause, it's there so that they can have some input.
Leverage. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But I think but I still think it's important to not give that, to be able to move him wherever you need to move him at a moment's notice, because I think you can't scream and yell about the Royals being transactional and then be okay with them building roadblocks to being transactional. Like, I think you're right. And I think the one thing, you can sign this deal, and if you get for it, sign a long-term 10-year deal. You mentioned 10-year deal with Bobby Witt Jr. I personally don't think he's going to sign one that long, because I think he's going to want to get a bite of the apple. Again, I think 7 years is probably about as long as you can go with him. But let's say, for argument's sake, you get him to a 10-year deal. When he's 29, 30, you got to be able to move that and flip it for some value, because I think that's going to be the trick. So,
well, I think a no trade clause also, it's not a binary thing. It's not yes or no. It's you might have a complete no trade clause for 3 years. And I can totally understand a player being like, I don't want to sign this deal, and then you trade me tomorrow. Like, the longer that you go into the contract, the less of a no trade clause he has, and then maybe he can block a trade to 10 teams for 2 years, and then it's 5 teams, and then it's none for the last 2 or 3 years. Like, there's a way to structure it, because I can understand a player, if he's giving you, that kind of commitment, that you have to demonstrate at least a commitment at the beginning of the contract. But certainly, like you said, I don't think the Royals are worried about being able to trade him when he's 25. That's not the point. The point is being able to trade him when he's 30. So yes, if he signs a 10-year deal, by year 7, year 8, you should be able to have pretty much complete leverage to trade him if you want to.
And in 8 years, he's a 10-5 guy anyway.
Well, true, exactly. So
if you're in this scenario, the last couple of years, it kicks in, and he's got it as part of it.
Well, then that's why you want that window. And this has happened in the past, where teams will sign a guy to a long-term deal, and they have a no trade clause to start, but it is structured so that the no trade clause expires right before their 10-5 kicks in. So they do have that window that they know they can use if they want to trade him before the player automatically gets a full no trade clause as stipulated by the CBA.
Yeah. And listen, we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it again. Matt asked the question, like, is there even a trade package that would be worth it? Yes, there is. We've done that conversation a couple of times, and we'll do it again, I'm sure, this off season, but I don't think you're going to see it in play, for the Royals. And Casey Curtis has a good question as well. Better question is, why would he want to stay for any amount? And there's some, the reason would be massive long-term security, and that can only be given to him by the team that he's playing for right now.
Right.
You can't get that from the Yankees until you can get to be a free agent. That would be the answer. But both points are very, very valid.
So let me throw out one other thing regarding that exact point, which is, do you remember Mike Sweeney's contract?
Yeah.
Do you remember there was a stipulation on Mike Sweeney's 5-year deal? Because there was, for a long time, there was a question about whether the Royals could sign Mike Sweeney because the Royals were, history repeats itself, were so bad that why would any young player want to commit to a team that couldn't win? Mike Sweeney signed a 5-year, $55 million deal. And then he started having back problems afterwards. And, a lot of people look back and say, the Royals never should have given it to him, but it actually wasn't as bad as it looks. But the point being is, when they signed him, it was considered a coup. But what they gave him was a stipulation that I don't think I've seen before or after in any long-term contract, which is he had an opt-out clause in his contract that only kicked in if the Royals did not finish above 500 in the first 3 years of the deal. I believe it was the first 3 years. So it's 5 years, but he could leave after year 3, but only it was based on team success. It was at the time, it had never been done. It was to the point where I think they had to get like a clarification from the league that it was even legal to do that. And in I believe it was the second year of the deal, the Royals had their magical fluke that was 2003, finished above 500, and boom, that clause is gone. He was locked in. He didn't have the option anymore. I don't know if I've ever seen another contract like that. But I wonder if I'm Bobby Witt, my number one concern with signing with the Royals isn't the amount of money. It's, do I want to sign with a team that's going to be terrible for the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Might that be an option that gives the Royals, gives Bobby Witt the security he wants, gives the Royals the assurance that if they can just build a good team around him, he won't be able to leave, but also incentivizes them to build that good team and gives him, the security that he's not going to end up like Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani, just shackled to a bad team through no fault of his own.
We are proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. You can take advantage of the best in the business, been handling parking lot problems since 1994. You can call them today at 816-484-3338. Find them online at gannasphalt.com. Get seal coating done, get the striping done. Listen, there's no reason to have the kind of liability. Accidents in your parking lot cost you money and slow down and greatly hinder your productivity. Make sure you've got a safe, brightly striped parking lot. Again, Asphalt and Concrete can do it for you. 816-484-3338. Find them online at gannasphalt.com. Randy, let's talk about Zack Greinke. First of all, do you think this is it for Zack?
I think Zach's the kind of guy who plays it close to his vest and it doesn't want a big fuss anyway. So it's not like, it wouldn't be like him to announce that he's, going to retire ahead of time. But yes, if I were to guess, I would say that we're in the very, very end stages of his career. He has 2 starts, maybe 3 left. Yeah, it hurts to say it, but yeah, I think this is it for Zack. And so I think it's a good time to sort of reflect on the career that he's had, his 20th season in the major leagues. He's been doing this almost as long as I've been writing about baseball. It's more than any other player, I feel like, that my career has sort of preceded, like I've covered, throughout, from beginning to end. His is special because we saw him, when he was a fresh-faced 20-year-old. We were anticipating him when he was one of the great pitching phenoms the Royals have ever developed. And even then, even at 19 and A-ball, and it wasn't just that he was this pitching phenom, but that he did it differently than other pitchers. And to have seen that full arc and to have seen him walk away from the game, to see him at hit rock bottom, to see him come back, to see him, have the single best season by a pitcher in Royals history. And to see him leave and then to see him come back a decade later, emotionally it's tough, but I think it's a good time to talk about his legacy.
Is he a Hall of Famer? I think some of the numbers I was looking at, because we decided we were going to talk about this. The 224 wins. He's 71st all time right now. He's tied with Jim Bunning. And you look around Catfish Hunter. He's tied with him. The one that jumps out at me the most, as we know, the win has become harder and harder to get, and has been largely overvalued probably throughout the years. But all-time strikeouts. 20th
Mm-hmm.
in strikeouts all time. I mean, plus fielded his position as well as anybody has ever fielded it. Hit about as well as in the top 1% of hitting pitchers and fielding pitchers that are out there. That to me is just phenomenal.
So Zack Greinke, in my mind, and yes, I'll cheerfully admit that I'm probably not the most unbiased person to weigh in on this, but Zack Greinke to me is absolutely a Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah.
The 224 wins you mentioned, I mean, just the quantity, that is, at a level that a lot of pitchers with those many wins are in the Hall of Fame. You mentioned Bunning, Catfish Hunter. A lot of pitchers who have that many wins who are not in the Hall of Fame, but pitcher wins are becoming harder and harder to come by for starting pitchers because they don't throw as many. They don't throw as many complete games. They don't throw as many innings. They don't get as many decisions. Anyway, the value of pitcher wins is suspect to begin with. What's interesting is winning percentage. His winning percentage right now, he's won 224 games, but he's lost.
This year ain't helping.
Well, yeah, well, he's lost 156. Right, his winning percentage for his career is .589, which is good, but not great. There are some Hall of Fame pitchers who absolutely are in that range. There are also pitchers with a .589 winning percentage who are not in the Hall of Fame. 2 years ago, before he came back to Kansas City, do you know what his winning percentage was? .624. His winning percentage has dropped 35 points in 2 seasons.
What if you take out all his Royals years?
Oh, we'll get to that. Right. So, but here's something I want to throw out there. He is 1-15 this year. For all the talk of a certain other pitcher on the roster, 1-15, despite not pitching terribly. I mean, he hasn't pitched great this year, but he's not pitched at 1-15 level. In the last 100 years, exactly 2 pitchers have gone 1-15 or worse. Anthony Young, you might recall the infamous Anthony Young, who lost 27 decisions in a row, some of that out of the bullpen. This was back in 1993. And then a guy named Mike Parrott with the 1980 Mariners went 1-16 as well. The only 2 pitchers in the live ball era to go 1-15 or worse. But even last year, when Zack Greinke was an above average pitcher, he went 4-9. The Royals they never score. His run support this year he's pitched in 27 games. They've scored 5 runs in 4 of them. I mean, and I think they've scored 1 or 0 in like 9 or 10. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me here. They've always. I mean, it's like he never left. He left the team for 12 years after they didn't score for him then. I mean, in his Cy Young year, the best season by a Royals pitcher ever, and he went 16-8. So yeah, you look at his overall winning percentage as a member of the Kansas City Royals, 65-91. His winning percentage, .417. I look up the pitchers in Major League history who have a winning percentage between 410 and .425. The best of them is a guy named Pedro Ramos. They're the names you might recognize on this list: Jose De Leon, Jose Mesa, Roberto Hernandez. These are bulk innings guys. These are not guys you would consider to be good pitchers. These are guys who are just good enough to stay in a major league rotation, but not good pitchers. But do you realize he has pitched for 5 other major league teams? His lowest winning percentage with any of those is .655 with the Diamondbacks. He was at .688 with the Astros, .735 with the Brewers, 750 with the Angels. Okay, he was only 6-2 there. And then 773 with the Dodgers. His record with every other team besides the Royals, 159 and 65. A 710 winning percentage. In the history of baseball, do you know how many pitchers have won at least 100 and let's say 125 games and have a winning percentage of 700? The answer is one. His name is Al Spalding, who was basically the first professional baseball star pitcher who pitched in the National Association from 1871 through 1877 and retired at the age of 27 to form a sporting goods company. You may have heard of it. It's called Spalding. The original Spalding is Al Spalding. He pitched for the Chicago Cubs in their inaugural year and then basically decided he could make more money by becoming a sports magnate instead. That is the only pitcher who's won 70% of his decisions. The highest winning percentage besides him, Clayton Kershaw at 697, and then Whitey Ford at 690. So the point is, if Zack Greinke had never pitched for the Royals, he would be the winningest pitcher, the best winning percentage of any pitcher in modern Major League history. The only blemish on Zack Greinke's record is the franchise that he pitched for, the franchise that drafted him and that he willingly chose to return to. The Royals never deserved Zack Greinke, and he even when he forced his way out of town, he did the franchise the biggest favor he could have and helped them win a World Series. To me, that is his ultimate legacy. That the Royals betrayed him over and over and over again when he was on the mound, and he repaid them by helping them win a World Series. That alone gets my vote for him to be in the Hall of Fame. But on top of that, like you said, one of the best fielding pitchers of all time. I would argue he is the best hitting pitcher of the 21st century, not named Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
If you look at his record, he's batted a little more than a full season's worth. 600 plate appearances exactly in his career. He had 225 with 9 homers and 25 doubles. I mean, he's a better hitter than Tony Pena. Tony Pena Jr. There's probably a few other guys who played every day for the Royals that he's a better hitter than. That adds another 5 wins above replacement to his record. He's as a pitcher, he's at 72 wins above replacement. Those are Hall of Fame standards. I think if he's on the border, the hitting alone puts him up above the threshold.
How about this? Similar pitcher scores, like you can look at this in Baseball Reference. Kurt Schilling, Tim Hudson, Kevin Brown, Justin Verlander, Mike Mussina, Bob Welch, Catfish Hunter, Juan Marichal, Mark Burley, Oral Hershiser. Pretty good company, right? Speaks to how good he's been. My favorite is the similarities by age. At 20, Denny McClain. Last 30-game winner. At 21, Mike Morrison. 23, Moose Haas. Now, this is when he's kind of having his struggles, and he's going back to the bullpen and everything like that. 24, Ben Sheets. If you're an old enough fantasy player like I am, Ben Sheets was a stud. Didn't have a long career, but he was a stud. 25, Ralph Terry. 26, Ben Sheets. 27, Andy Bennis, a 1-1 draft pick. Was at one point, I think, and maybe still is, the most accomplished 1-1 in the history of the draft. Alex Fernandez, who was very good. At 30, Madison Bumgarner. At 31, Brett Saberhagen. 32 through 35, Justin Verlander. 36, Mike Mussina, who's in the Hall of Fame. 37 and 38, Justin Verlander. That's who Zack Greinke is.
It's fascinating because him and Verlander came up almost the same time. I think Greinke came up a little earlier, but Greinke was also a high school guy. Verlander's actually, I think, a little bit older, and they're very different types of pitchers. It's almost it's not exact, but it's almost like a Clemens Maddox thing, where Greinke is more the Maddox and Verlander is more the Clemens, and just in terms of the style. And yet they're both elite guys. The other guys of that generation you think of, Kershaw, I mentioned. maybe CC Sabathia. I'm trying to think of, there's only 4 or 5 guys this century. Oh, Max Scherzer. That's the other one you would throw into that category. They all kind of came up around the same time, and I don't think Greinke is looked at that the perception of him is at a Kershaw, Scherzer, Verlander level. And I frankly think it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, he won a Cy Young award, and when I say he had the best season by a Royals pitcher, he actually, by wins above replacement, his 2009 season is the greatest season by a Royal, period. George Brett in 1980 is not number 1. He's number 2. And before people grab their pitchforks and say, oh, wins above replacement's a stupid stat because of that, remember, George Brett missed 45 games that year. If he had played a full season, he would have had one of the all-time wins above replacement for any player at any team. But he did miss 45 games. So he's number 2. Zack Greinke in 2009 is number 1. He also had a season with the Dodgers where he had a 1.66 ERA.
Was robbed of the Cy Young.
It was just like, I mean, Jake Gary, it was
robbed of the Cy
crazy.
Young.
Might have been, but I get why he
was
didn't get it.
Robbed of the Cy Young.
Okay. The point being is he had another Cy Young worthy season. He also finished 4th in 2017 in the Cy Young vote. He had a peak from, basically 08 through 2019, a 12-year peak. He was one of the 2 or 3 best pitchers in baseball for a 12-year span. That is a Hall of Famer in my book. And durable as hell. Like, yeah, he's missed. He's been on the injured list briefly with the Royals here as he's approaching age 40, but he basically didn't miss a start for like 15 years, except I think he got injured when Carlos Quentin, who charged the mound and like broke a rib or something.
Yeah.
He didn't have an arm-related injury for 20. He has a perfect emotion, a fluid emotion, and he's such a great athlete that his injury risk was as low as any pitcher in the sport. And all those soft factors. Again, if he had never pitched for the Royals, he had never been drafted by the Royals, I think he would be a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer. And it's not his fault that he pitched for a franchise that frankly probably didn't deserve him, but and he came back to them anyway. So he's always going to have that special place in my heart.
I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think he'll get in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he'll go in the first time. I think he'll go in about his 5th, 6th year.
I mean, Mike Messina, you mentioned that is a good comp. As somebody, I am hopeful as the electorate gets smarter and smarter. Guys who we used to say, well, that guy may not get in at all, and then they get in, and then the guy we think is going to get on the 8th ballot gets in on the 4th ballot. I actually, Scott Rowland. There was a time where people thought Scott Rowland would never get in, and he got in very quickly. So I'm actually hopeful Greinke may get in, if not on the 1st ballot, on the 2nd or 3rd.
He'll sit at least 1 extra year. Even though I find him absolutely fascinating, incredibly entertaining, sensationally honest, and one of my favorite interviews, number 1 interview that I could possibly ever do. Most of the media, because Zack Greinke doesn't just do the interview for you, is not probably the most popular guy. When I talk to people who covered him in other towns, like, oh yeah, enjoy that. I do. He's my favorite. I love talking to him. He's fantastic. But he may sit an extra year because of that. But I do think he'll get in. Do you think he gets in?
I do. I think he'll get in, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in on the 1st ballot. I may be giving the media too much credit here. My fellow media members. I actually think what you're saying early in his career, even in 10 years in, there was this guy's a difficult interview. I think you stick around long enough, and even your sharp edges become like lovable. And I think Zack Greinke has stayed in the league long enough for his idiosyncrasies and quirks to become part of the legend. The Athletic has published multiple oral histories of Zack Greinke, which I think have helped may help to frame him as a unique guy who dances to his own beat, but that
everyone right. I hope you're right that
love
he becomes the character, and it actually works in his favor.
Right.
I will. I'm not going to say, because I have family now. Were I a single guy, there's no chance that Zack Greinke would give a Hall of Fame speech and I wouldn't be in Cooperstown. Now, when it comes, I may be taking kids to, dealing with college and different things like that. So, but I will try very, very hard to be in
Cooperstown.
Cooperstown.
I've never been to Cooperstown. But as my kids get older, and it's going to be 5 or 6 years at least. By then, my youngest will be heading off to college. That sounds actually like an excellent summer for me to make my first trip.
I was there for
I
George
think,
Brett. My one trip was there.
I did. I didn't get to go for Brett. I think I might want to go for Greinke.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. It would be fantastic. All right, don't forget, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. You can get on the schedule right now. Just call 816-484-3338 or go online to GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots for the good doctor. Dr. Rany Jazayerli back home after a weekend at Kauffman Stadium. Glad you're home safe, Rany. It was great to see you here in KC. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City, saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kauffman Corner.